Morning, everyone. We're just waiting for attendance to trickle in, and we'll start in a few minutes. Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our final webinar, basically doing business in the US and with the Department of Defense. My name is Brandon Florian. I am with Starburst Accelerator. We are the commercial entity working with the US Air Force and the UK MOD to deliver this Allied Defense Accelerator program, as well as International Space Pitch Day. Today we have a distinguished guest of panelists that are going to be talking to us on all different aspects of how startups can go about setting up shop in the US and starting to work with the Department of Defense. Before we introduce themselves, I just want to make sure that everyone is cognizant of the registration deadline that's coming up for all suppliers who are interested in submitting a proposal for this DASA competition. The registration is August 19th. If you go to our website, which I will put the link in the chat function, I know most of you have probably already done it already, but just in case you haven't, we'll put it in the chat window at the bottom. You'll be able to register in there, and after you register within our page, you must go to the DASA webpage and also fill out the registration questionnaire. That is the first step in the process for being able to submit your proposals by September 2nd. It's been a long, good 2 weeks of challenge webinars that we've hosted. A lot of information has been shared from different challenge stakeholders across organizations. These webinars this week have focused more on how now the businesses can start working within the UK and the US. So that's been our focus for this week. If you have missed any of the challenge webinars or the webinar on Monday, you can also go to our website again, which the link will be shared with you, and you can find all the recorded webinars on there for you to be able to go back and review. One quick final thing, even though Zoom is the way of life for all of us right now, we will be taking questions and answers. If you scroll down to the bottom of your Zoom window, you should see a little Q&A function button that pops up. So we ask that all questions be submitted through that Q&A function, since no one has the ability to unmute themselves and ask a question. Through that Q&A session, we'll be able to vet those questions and get those questions to the panelists for them to answer. So with that being said, I would like to introduce Captain Jake Singleton, who will start us off.
Thank you, Brandon. Excited to have everyone joining us today. I just want to kind of introduce the objectives of this webinar and complement here what Brandon said. The point of our International Space Pitch Day is that we want to increase cooperation among the UK-US defense, where we have shared challenges and needs within space operations and space domain awareness. but we want to increase that cooperation with a specific focus on the global marketplace. So we want to be an early adopter and partner for rising space companies wherever you are in the world. So the way that we've done that is we have started through the webinars over the last couple of weeks in introducing some specific problem areas or challenges that our space operators are experiencing both on the US and the UK. These have been represented across organizations, 8 different organizations in the US and UK, including the Air Force, Space Force, Space Command, the US Army, the Royal Air Force, Strategic Command, as well as the British Army and Royal Marines. They've talked about needs and challenges that they've had. Now, we're not looking just simply for comprehensive solutions to these problems, but we realize that there are companies around the world that are developing these and relevant space capabilities independent of their requirements and completely unaware of their challenges and needs. So we want to work with you. We want to hear what you guys are doing. And hopefully, when you see some of the challenge areas, you may pick up on, hey, the thing that I'm building or developing could bring some value to that. And that's what we want you to be aware of as you submit these proposals. But if you have a great company with an amazing, incredible solution, technology, whatever it might be, with some awareness of a challenge or need that they could solve, that's not enough. A lot of companies ask, well, what is the path to get me there, to successfully transition a solution to that customer? That is challenging alone for a US company within the US today, but there have been transformative changes made over the last couple of years within the US so that the Air Force is a valuable partner and early adopter and easy to work with, easier than ever. But that has broken down as soon as we've gone outside of our borders. And I meet a lot of space companies or other companies around the world saying, hey, we're raising capital, developing the, this solution. How would I come work with the Department of Defense, with the Air Force, the Space Force? And there have been a lot of challenges to that. But this program is a first and exciting step to say, we do want to work with you, and we want to bring mentors and support and services to support you, not only with putting you on contract and giving you a customer, but understanding the path to get there. So all the people that are on this call today are experts and resources in different ways that can help us understand what that path is. This is just an introduction, but companies that are invited to pitch at Pitch Day will be able to participate in design sprints where they'll get more intimate one-on-one iterative feedback to support, as they pitch, actually understanding what that transition path looks like, because we want you to be successful and we want to successfully meet solve those challenges and missions that we have. So I'm really excited about, the panel members here. They're going to be talking about, accessing the market, raising capital, working with defense organizations, things that, we're doing differently, like Air Force Ventures, as far as doing business differently. We're going to talk about, the international regulatory pieces, things to be aware of and things that you need to do. And then we're going to hear about, from a company who's been able to successfully, work with us and scale, that we're really excited about. So with that, again, really excited to have everyone here. Check out the website and make sure that you're aware of those deadlines that Brandon's talked about so that you don't miss this opportunity to work with us. Thanks, Brandon.
Great. Thanks, Jake, for that introduction and recap. But yes, as Jake mentioned, today we're going to be discussing mainly 3 topics. Those topics are going to be investment readiness, transition confidence, and then international considerations. Since we have a lot of international companies that are present and are looking to participate in this competition, we want to make sure that you guys have all the resources and understand the different nuances when it comes to working within the US and with the DoD. With that, let's get started. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to dive right into investment readiness. And with that, I want to introduce Kelly Perdue from Moonshots Capital, a VC firm out of Los Angeles, one of our most active people within our ecosystem as a venture capitalist who participates in a lot of events. He's talked for us before. So Kelly, if I could ask you to turn on your video and unmute yourself. yeah, wave to the crowd. We'll start it off, and I kind of want to prime you a little bit and say, VCs have this mentality of I'll know it when I see it when it comes to investment, like into a company that they like. But people don't really understand the formal way that investors assess project maturity or quantify risks. So if you could kind of just start us off and let us know how you approach investment readiness when it comes to companies that you guys look at.
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you the whole team from Starburst for putting these on. It's fantastic. You guys run a great show. My partner and I, Craig Cummings, he's based in Austin. I'm based in Los Angeles. We're both West Point graduates and served active duty. And our investment thesis is really focusing on finding extraordinary leadership. Our backgrounds obviously, sway us towards liking military veterans. So as you might imagine, military veterans have a lot of ideas on problem solving in and around DoD, government activities and the like in public sector. So we do see a lot of deal flow in this space. And when we're making the decision on whether or not to invest in a company, our primary consideration is the quality of the leadership team. And there are a lot of characteristics that go into that. I, in fact, wrote a book on it that examines those leadership traits and leadership characteristics that we evaluate during the front end process. But there are a lot more than that too, especially as you mentioned that they're international companies looking to work with the government in the United States. And the number one thing I think that, especially from a venture capital side, is a dual use perspective. And what I mean by that is there are very few investors who solely invest in an application that has, for instance, a DoD application. That's the only client that they're going to have. It's a somewhat murky and foreign water to navigate and to navigate successfully. And it's very difficult to get to predictability, which is something that venture capitalists in particular really like, being able to know that if I spend $10 in sales or $10 on selling, I'm going to get $100 in revenue in that over the next 3 to 6 months. That's an equation that venture capitalists spend a lot of time on with their companies trying to figure out. Very hard to do in the government sector because of the unknowability of being able to close a contract. Once you get one, it's fantastic, but a lot of venture money is very suspect and concerned and kind of devalues that capability. So really knowing and understanding that you can, yes, you have a DoD application, and in the commercial sector, that opens the aperture significantly for people who are looking for investments. And then I'd say, almost every VC's got about the same 8 to 10 line items for a very high attention to the planning process, understanding your business model and unit economics, really understanding where you fit in the marketplace, getting product market fit. These are incredibly important, especially for where we invest, which is kind of early stage and kind of late in the seed cycle, right before, in that 12 to 18 months before you're going to go out for an A. Those are incredibly important factors that we look at in terms of whether or not we're going to put money into a company.
Understood. So I guess when it comes also to how, maybe some examples of technologies that you've seen and invested in most recently in aerospace and defense, and what are those verticals that you look for that you see as, growth potential or scaling potential, dual use potential? That's a huge, factor right now when it comes to what's happening within the aerospace and defense market.
Absolutely. Well, one that I know you're familiar with, since you guys are also investors, is Red 6. And Dan Robinson's the CEO there. He's also, a foreign national. He's from the UK, F-22 pilot. He is a phenomenal leader, and the technology that company's building is kind of mind blowing. It's in augmented reality, and it's in probably the most dynamic environment that exists in the world. Maybe space is about the same, but it's very similar in terms of, you know, a fighter pilot in the cockpit, being able to train with, you know, a augmented reality enemy aircraft that they're able to dogfight with. And that was one that we met very early on. We believed in the team and the leadership that they had. We believed and understood the problem set that they were trying to solve for, and they're very precise in articulating it. And they found a client very early on, and were part of the AFWorks program. I'm sure they could be talked about later as part of the continued discussion here. But the AFWorks program has been spectacular for them, and they set up objectives that the Air Force wanted to see. They knocked those out and then some in each of the phase 1 and phase 2, and are, you know, excelling in that program. So the fact that we are, you know, moving towards a phase 3, and that they've excelled at what they're trying to execute against for a problem set, was not lost on the rest of the investment community as well. They most recently announced an investment from a prime, from Lockheed, who looked at the technology that they built and developed to date, again, on very limited capital, and were so impressed with it that they decided to invest directly into the company. So that is an excellent example of both, you know, your guys' decision-making in terms of investing and assisting them in this ecosystem, as well as the AFWorks program. While it's not, you know, anything government related, you know, has a high regulation component to it, and you have to cross a lot of T's and dot a lot of I's. But if you stay with a high attention to detail and execute on it, I can tell you firsthand that it's doable.
Great. No, I definitely agree with you on that. And I guess, you know, based on what you're talking about, and the examples that you've given as far as companies that you've invested in, I think, you know, maybe one last thing to touch on would be, you know, what would be your recommendation for companies that are looking to go down the path of Red 6, and how can they, you know, increase or better their story and their presentations, and, you know, what Steve Blank likes to refer to as their investment readiness level, to, you know, to catch the eye of someone like Moonshots?
So I think there are a lot of ways to describe it. But, you know, sales cures all ills. If you can find a client and a champion in an organization that is willing to pay for what you're developing, that kind of silences any other issues that exist. So, you know, truly being able to articulate the product market fit to the degree that a large customer is willing to bet on you, even in a pilot stage, is super critical, especially right now. If it's all lab work, and it sounds interesting and it sounds neat, but you haven't gotten any traction yet, that's going to be, and you're in a single use environment, i.e. you're just developing something for the space program and you can't describe or articulate how that might have commercial applications. I think it's going to be very difficult to find at least a venture capital fund that's going to be willing to back you that early on. They're going to want to see proof of life, i.e., hey, there is a customer, you have articulated and made a compelling argument for why that customer is going to want to pay money for what you're building, and then also be able to describe how that has an application in the commercial sector.
Awesome. No, I think that's right on the money. Thank you, Kelly, for those insights. And I think this sets up perfectly to now bring in the other side of the, I guess, venture equation, and introduce Jason Rathje from Air Force Ventures. So Jason, based on everything that we've heard from Kelly as far as how private equity makes their decisions as far as investment readiness into their startups, I would love for you to kind of explain to everyone, you know, the origins of Air Force Ventures, how Air Force Ventures works, and what the role is in helping companies like Red 6 or companies like Orbital Sidekick, which we'll hear from a little bit later, get to that next level of scaling. So with that, I turn it over to you.
Great. No, thank you, Brandon, and Kelly set it up perfectly, talking about Red 6, which is one of our our companies that is doing incredibly well. So it's certainly a great, case study of the process and how it can work. And Red 6 was actually a very early adopter of the process. And so a lot of work has been done to try to make the process better and more efficient, and kind of how our investment thesis is actually turned into a reality from getting funding out into the ecosystem, and certainly a continuous experiment to try to make this process better, easier for companies to use who haven't had familiarity with the defense sector in the past. So a quick history of AF Ventures in our relationship with AFWorks. We started a pilot program with AFWorks in 2018 in conjunction with the Air Force SBIR program to do a new experiment in how we execute the Air Force's SBIR sitter portfolio with a focus on allowing commercially oriented companies to pitch their ideas to us. The going in thesis for the SBIR program historically has been there are defined topic areas that have these kind of narrowly focused defense needs that are met by companies that companies can submit proposals to. Instead, we wanted to open up the aperture a bit here, really kind of allow for ideation to happen, give some guiding lights in some focus areas, but not constrain it to an over specified technological paradigm for companies that are primarily focused on the commercial markets. And so what we do at Ventures is we try to overlay the drive and the incentives and the go-to-market on the commercial side with the requirements and the go-to-market on the Air Force side. That experiment in 2018 with a handful of dollars has quickly grown into the program we have today. We have contracted over 1,500 companies through AF Ventures, which is, for those of you who have been with us for quite some time, this has all been under the AFWorks moniker. AF Ventures is still an organization within AFWorks. It's just the focused entity that's continuing to execute and grow this program, as well as some others. In and around working with innovative companies who are trying to find traction and growth opportunities within the Air Force marketplace. But I do want to hit on a point that Kelly brought up that, again, we're also really looking for dual use innovations. Our focus at AF Ventures is on the commercial markets and commercial technological innovation. And so what we try to assess is how do those commercial growth trajectories also intersect with what the Air Force market is asking for or is willing to bear from a risk perspective. And then we invest where we see great companies, and there's a few on this call today that we've invested in utilizing Air Force dollars through non-dilutive contract mechanisms to fund companies. But we only fund companies where the Air Force has signaled specific and great interest. And the way we notify and signal that is through our process, where we bring in Air Force customers and Air Force users, get them involved in the process. So we're not investing just the Air Force SBIR budget, a portion of the SBIR budget in this mechanism, but we're only investing in those areas where companies find real government traction, real Air Force market traction. And where we find the overlay between those growth incentives, between what the Air Force is interested in buying after our investment ends, and where the commercial market is interested in buying products and services as well, that's where we are interested in investing and help to catalyze and scale that growth. And recently, we continue to try to scale our efforts. As a quick wrap up here, just on what AF Ventures is from a process perspective. Our goals are to award 1,000 small, seed round, angel size type contracts a year at $50,000, 200 to 300 larger contracts between $750,000 and $1 million a year. And then at the end, try to award really large contract actions, which we call our strategic fund increase program, where we're really trying to bring those companies that we've been working with for a couple of years into the next level, where now they can grow and scale to become real players in the Air Force market space.
Thanks, Jason, for that overview. So based on just the last thing that you mentioned, I guess the question that I would have, and probably some other startups have, is it possible for later stage companies to come in later in the game and not have started with, you know, the Air Force with a phase 1 SBIR and kind of gone through that process? Is it possible for them to come in later and still be able to, you know, qualify for those strategic fundings, as you mentioned?
100%. So you have to enter into our process before you're eligible for the strategic fund increases. And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? I mean, we want to obviously get to know you. We want the Air Force to get to know you. We want to make sure that there's a good fit there. I mean, as Kelly discussed, you know, we try to make our process as easy to use as we possibly can. You know, our phase 1 requirements are very simple, 5-page technical volume and 15-slide deck. But as you get more into the belly of the beast, you understand that there's certain things that you need to do as a company in order to be really eligible for growth, and those things do take time. And so our goal is to invest in your time for that period of time in order to help you grow and scale into those really big strategic awards. But you don't need to come in through a phase 1. We have another option called a direct to phase 2. Unfortunately, our offerings as of today are limited to US-based companies. Although we do a lot of work and working with Jake and people like Jake to help try to expand and extend the role of AF Ventures in an international setting. The SBIR part of what we do, the SBIR part, is only for US-based firms. And there are many options out there. And for anyone who's interested, I just highly recommend you go check out the AFWorks website, where you'll see all of this information.
Great. Thank you very much, Jason. I think, you know, bringing AFWorks Ventures and bringing it to the forefront and showing how you guys work with AFWorks in conjunction with other organizations, which, you know, one of the other organizations, DIU, who we're going to bring Mike up to talk in just a minute. You know, it really is telling to show the amount of effort and the amount of, I guess, momentum that the US government is putting behind these programs and really trying to push innovation to the forefront, just so, you know, the US and the DoD stay ahead of you know, foreign actors and other adversarial environments, I guess you could say. But I mean, there's a reason why AFWorks was named, you know, one of the top 100 companies for innovators to work at by Fast Company this year. So thank you so much for sharing that with us and for being a part of this conversation. I think that leads perfectly into the next conversation, as you were talking about how the SBIR is mainly focused for US companies, but, you know, we do have international companies here. So what would be a good first step for that international tie-in? And I think bringing in Mike Madsen from DIU to kind of talk about that transition confidence, as well as looking at international opportunities, would be great. So Mike, if I could have you turn on your camera and unmute yourself. Welcome.
You bet. Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is a very, very important topic. So thrilled to be here to talk about that. Let me share my slide. I have some visual aids to help guide this discussion.
Yeah, we can see it on our end if you just want to full screen it.
Yeah, just looking to full screen it right now. There we go.
Awesome.
Excellent. So yeah, great to be here. A quick background on DIU, the Defense Innovation Unit. It was stood up in 2015 by then Secretary of Defense Ash Carter as a way to reinvigorate, rebuild that connective tissue between government and the tech ecosystem. Initially, it was designed as tech discovery, to go out, see what kind of cool technology was out there, and try to bring it back into the Department of Defense. Of course, anyone who's worked with the bureaucracy that is DoD recognizes that that's going to be more challenging. And so in 2016, we flipped the switch to our current model, which is starting with the demand side. So for every project, we start with a DoD problem, and then we put that out to the tech ecosystem, which we found is much more efficient and effective. You've heard a word today, or a phrase, dual use technology. I'm definitely going to hit that. That is where our value space is. We're looking at dual use technology. And we think that every procurement in DoD should start with a basic question of, is there a commercial solution that through customization and proof through prototyping will solve these problems, and to leverage some of that commercial technology out there. We're headquartered in Silicon Valley. We have an outpost in Austin, Boston, and DC. And we look for commercial tech, not just in Silicon Valley or across the US, but we look globally. I'll get to tease that out here in a second. So our initial mission, as defined by Ash Carter, was to accelerate the adoption of commercial technology into DoD, across the Joint Force, all the services and agencies, as well as transform the capacity and capability of the department. That was Secretary Mattis's go-do when he came in. He liked what we were doing, but wanted us to make sure that we were taking on the truly transformative projects that have the capacity to scale across platforms and services. And then strengthen the national security innovation base as defined in the National Defense Strategy. Two other entities that are part of DIU that allow us to focus on the entire spectrum of tech development as well as the participants is the National Security Innovation Network. And this is a network that's working with the labs and universities for early stage development, but also illuminating a pathway for talented technologists to come and work for the government. And then National Security Innovation Capital is an initiative we've been working on for about 2 years now. And it looks like we've gotten some traction on this. And the goal here is to catalyze investment in dual use hardware. I saw there was a question that already popped up on software versus hardware. We've recognized that about 90% of US venture capital goes to software. And so we want to ensure that we are including the hardware into the solution set also. DIU is centered around 5 tech focus areas. You can see those listed on the side. They directly align with the Department of Defense modernization priorities, as well as the National Defense Strategy. We do engage with the tech sector companies, as well as VCs, to keep our finger on the pulse of emerging technology. One area we're looking at right now is power and energy and advanced technology materials to determine if there's enough supply and demand for a portfolio in DIU. So stay tuned for that. Now getting into a brief discussion on why commercial. If you look at the slide on the right there, there's a $250 billion annual difference between government and industry R&D spending. That's our value space. And then if you look on the left side, the top 5 tech companies outspend the top 5 traditional defense industrial base companies by an order of magnitude. And we want to be able to leverage all of that spending. So taking it out a little bit and focusing on the international realm, in the 60s, almost 40% of global R&D was US Defense Department related. Pretty incredible. Led to things like microelectronics, touchscreen, all that stuff that, well, you can find it packaged in your cell phone, to be quite honest. And so the point there is that the government used to be the first adopter of all of these technologies of consequence. And then they found their way into the commercial sector. Now, skip ahead to current time, and you can see that US Defense Department is only about 4% of global R&D, but look at the rest of the world, 72%. So all of those technologies of interest are all being developed outside of the government in the US tech sector, but into a more larger share in the global tech sector. And this is why dual use technology is so important to us. We'll talk about it a little bit in this presentation and then in the next block also. What we represent is a lowering of barriers to entry to the defense marketplace for a lot of these commercial companies, because we want to take that commercial industry as a first adopter and get that technology to the department. And that really is what DIU was designed for, to lower those barriers of entry, to make DoD and government look more like a commercial entity. So the experiment is working. We heard Jason talk about the experiment of AppWorks. DIU started as an experiment, and it is working, but we need to continue to look at the scale. We've done several things to allow DoD to start to look like a sophisticated partner, a commercial entity to others in the commercial sector. So we're engaged across DoD. Like I mentioned, it all starts with a DoD problem that starts the demand function. And then we've established relationships with the commercial ecosystem. What we do is, like I said, reducing barriers to entry for non-traditional companies. The statute that allows us to use other transaction authorities specifically cites non-traditional companies, but there are provisions for traditional companies as well. We developed the commercial solutions opening concept, and we'll tease that out a little bit more in the next block. And what we're able to do there is leverage other transaction authority and a competitive selection process to rapidly award prototype contracts in 60 to 90 days is our goal, and then field that technology in 24 months. You can see over there on the right, we're running about 150 days right now, so we're continuing to work to get that down. We brought on some more KOs to help us accelerate those. And one other thing that we've also done is we have generated 2 internal organizations to really start with the end transition in mind when we begin. We have a defense engagement team, and you can think of it as a two-way street in the commercial sector of business development and sales. So what the defense engagement team does, they are out pounding the pavement, talking to the services, the acquisition executives, the end users, the program offices, all of those folks in the vertical of the procurement entity, to find out what are the problems, what are the problem sets that there's probably a commercial solution for, and then they work to curate that problem and bring it back into DIU. At the same time, we have a commercial engagement team that's engaged with the venture capital ecosystem, as well as technology focus areas, to make sure that when we do take on a problem, that we have a rich, robust ecosystem from which to tap. For example, if we push out a solicitation, we don't want just one vendor in that tech focus area. We want to make sure we have a good, robust competition in that leading edge technology area. Then we go through the prototyping phase, onto production, and then the defense engagement team can pick that back up. Once we have a successful prototype that has moved on to production in one area, they can take that around to other entities in DoD and essentially sell it back to see if that successful prototype can solve some other solutions in some of the other services. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. You can see some of our numbers over there to the side. DIU in itself has a fairly modest budget, but we leverage our DoD partner funding as well as private investment in the venture capital and private equity ecosystem. You can see that we successfully transitioned about 40% of our projects. We think that's a little bit low. Obviously, we don't expect it to be 100%, so we're taking on some initiatives to see what we can do to increase our transition rate. But we think 25% that don't move past prototype is probably about the right number. If it was 100%, we wouldn't be taking enough risk, and we're okay with some of those prototypes not answering the question and then moving on or shifting, coming at it from a different customization perspective. But we do start with our transition rate in mind. And then to start, our DIU website is where we post all of our solicitations. I believe we do have one out right now, but any company, US or a partner allied company, is able to submit any proposals for those solicitations.
Great, Mike. Thanks for that overview. Super helpful, especially understanding how the DIU engine works. I know when I first saw Defense Secretary Ash Carter instate it, it was, at the time I was still at Northrop, and I was like, wow, like what is going on now that the DoD is in Silicon Valley, and the the amount of growth that I've seen DIU take from that time until now is truly inspiring. And, you know, it's great to have organizations like this helping both domestically and internationally with our allied partners. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think based on those discussions that we've had already, this is the perfect time to bring in a true success story of a company that started, you know, at its beginning through the Air Force SBIR venture, or not even ventures, SBIR phase ones that have, you know, started with a prototype, scaled up through prototype, and are now looking to raise their first series round. But I will let him tell that story. So with that, I would like to introduce Dan Katz, CEO of Orbital Sidekick. So Dan, yep, turning the camera on. Perfect.
Hey everyone, great. I'll go ahead and share my screen as well. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and present with everyone. So I was asked to go ahead and kind of share the story of Orbital Sidekick. And as Brandon was saying, our kind of journey from you know, our genesis to where we are today, and the methods and means by which we've leveraged partnership opportunities with the Air Force, and so I'll just kind of go ahead and dive into it. So Orbital Sidekick, for those who don't know, we provide global persistent monitoring solutions for the energy industry. And at a high level, we are building right now and working towards deploying a constellation of hyperspectral satellites, which we will use to capture hyperspectral data on a daily basis over customer assets. We have a proprietary analytics engine that we utilize to extract meaningful, actionable information from that hyperspectral data. And then we use that to feed our global monitoring application that we call Sigma. It's a web-based user platform where our customers and end users can access that information to make better informed decisions about asset integrity. Again, mainly focused on the commercial side. On the energy sector, most of our customers on the commercial end are in the oil and gas industry, looking at monitoring oil and gas pipelines, fixed facilities, refineries, and other assets. But there's clear applications in myriad commercial industries, and there's also a clear defense use case in our daily persistent global hyperspectral monitoring system we have here. So we've come a long way. We started out in 2016. My co-founder Tushar Prabhakar and I started in my garage in San Francisco, kind of that typical Silicon Valley startup story. We both came from Space Systems Loral, which is now part of Maxar. So left there in late 2016, kind of tinkering around with the concept of deploying a constellation of hyperspectral satellites to monitor energy assets. In 2017, and it's a bit of a timeline I'll kind of go through, is when we started really getting serious about how are we going to build a company. So in 2016, it was more just, you know, tinkering with a few things in a lab. 2017, it was more about, can we actually build a company around this, you know, build a business, does the model close, and how can we get some help? So a really key thing for us in 2017 is we joined an accelerator program. It was a joint venture between AFRL and Lightspeed Innovations, and their space accelerator. Captain Singleton was part of that program, along with a lot of other really innovative young leadership within the Air Force. And really, this, for anyone else out there who are entrepreneurs and looking to kind of get things going, I highly recommend taking part in some type of accelerator program, if at all possible. It really is an invaluable process. And what it really did was emphasize this lean startup methodology. I think Steve Blank's name has been mentioned a few times here already. There is Hacking for Defense class. One thing that I thought was really interesting was the folks at the Air Force looked at the innovation cycle, comparing, you know, the most powerful, most advanced military in the world, our innovation cycle in the US was far inferior to that of the Taliban in Afghanistan. And then as an effect, that really affected our ability to respond to IED targeting and IED incidents. So seeing this, you know, as an early stage startup, you kind of look at the government as kind of in fear and more of an innovation, you know, squashing innovation. And so we had apprehension about working with the US government, admittedly, and the military. But after going through this program and really recognizing that there was really strong young leadership that was pushing towards and recognizing that there was this innovation cycle gap here, and that there was a real need to treat and to build up a kind of a lean startup, not just methodology, but kind of mindset within the DoD was really encouraging for us. So we just, you know, they were showing that they were going to lean into us, and we were going to lean into them. So that was in 2017. In 2018, coming out of that startup, the Space Accelerator, we were able to get an OTA. So actually, before we got even a phase 1, we got an OTA, and give another shout out to Captain Singleton. He really worked his butt off to help us get that OTA over the line following the accelerator program. He really believed in what we were doing and the capability that we were working to deploy. And so in early 2018, we got an OTA that was hosted by the Air Force Research Lab. And actually at that time, we kind of thought that OTA might be the better way forward in terms of acquisition. And I think that was still kind of the mentality then, because we hadn't, I guess AFWERX really hadn't come into the fray yet as innovating on their special open topics on the SBIR side. So that OTA was really critical for us, because what that did was, it takes a lot to put something in space, especially new technology. It takes a lot of capital that you're gonna have to raise. So what we started with doing was aerial programs. So the OTA allowed us to expand our aerial program, demonstrate our capability on the commercial side and on the DoD side as well. But it really helped scale our aerial program, scale the analytics because we had more data to capture, and expand our team. So that was a really critical program for us. And then we were able to graduate into the SBIR program with a phase 1. So at the end of 2018, the special open topics were starting to open up. So we were part of one of the first cohorts there that AFWERX was putting forth. So we applied to that and were accepted. So that was just kind of the next step for us. Another key thing, one of the other things that the OTA opened up for us was that, and looking forward towards the phase 1, it allowed us to gain a lot of investor traction. So in this time in 2018, we were able to go out and raise our first venture fund. So that was obviously incredibly critical for us for our growth path. Also critical for us in 2018 and tied to the phase 1, we actually got to launch our first space mission. So we launched what we called HEIST, is our Hyperspectral Earth Imaging System trial, which was deployed on the International Space Station. So that was launched in 2018, and part of the SBIR program was covering some of the phase 2 that we eventually won as well, was covering some tasking and some data acquisition and analysis from this program. So that was in 2018. As I said, the OTA, the phase 1 HEIST launch, and the seed funding from the VC. So that was all really critical. 2019 was really focusing on the HEIST mission itself. So now we're in space. We're also still doing aerial programs, and we're being supported again, not just from our private funding from 2018, but also now graduating to a phase 2. So, transitioning to phase 2, more money involved, but also more stakeholders interested in what we're working on. So we worked very closely again with AFRL, but also we had NASIC, so representatives from the intelligence community looking at ISR applications of our hyperspectral data and leveraging our HEIST platform to capture data and analyze the quality and help guide us and provide some background with what changes we might need to make in order to scale this dual use solution on the government side, because we were gaining a lot of traction on the commercial side. So we were also developing other tools. So for NASIC and for other government customers, we were working on developing rapid tasking tools so they could access certain areas and collect data using our platforms. But on the commercial end, we were capturing data and demonstrating our ability to do things like capturing the evidence of an oil spill in the Grand Bahamas after Hurricane Dorian. This is a really cool proof point for us. Again, it was kind of a lot of this being enabled by our partnership with the Air Force. We're also worked on continuing to develop our analysis tools and again, just continuing to demonstrate the power and fidelity of Sigma and still just continuing to work with the Air Force all through this process and our TPOCs and at AFRL, and demonstrating our ability to deliver a data product that had dual use applications. We scaled on the commercial side as well. We started gaining contracts with some of the largest oil and gas pipeline operators in North America, and that's kind of, and then one thing I'll also mention as well, almost forgot. In 2019, we continued to engage with the Air Force on a few other types of events. And this kind of goes back to my earlier suggestion about getting into an accelerator program if possible as an early stage entrepreneur, but also just signing up for as many networking and kind of these hacking or fast innovation cycle events. So AFWERX Fusion events, the AFWERX Fusion event last year in Las Vegas was a great way for us to showcase our ability on the showroom floor. And then Hyperspace Challenge in last November was a great sprint for us, a 3-day sprint, kind of a networking and problem-solving sprint that we gained a lot of value from. So highly recommend signing up for those events if possible. So that's kind of bringing us up to 2020. So 2020, we are today we're working on launching our first standalone satellite that we call Aurora. And the really big event for us, apart from Aurora, is the participation of AFWERX and their technical select of us for the Strategic Fund Increase Award. So after the phase 2, getting the StratFi Award, Jason spoke to that a bit earlier, and that's in conjunction with raising our Series A round. So effectively, the StratFi Award allows us to double the funding that we are capturing from our Series A, and really that's what is going to allow us to launch 6 hyperspectral satellites, scale our analytics platform and our web-based user platform in Sigma. So we're very excited about all the partnership opportunities we've had over the last few years. We absolutely would not be where we are today without those partnership opportunities, and we're excited to continue developing those relationships moving forward into the future. And lastly, I did just want to give a shout out to the team. So as I said before, we started in 2016 with just Tushar and myself in a garage in San Francisco. We've since grown our team, and really, you're only as strong as the people that you bring into your plan. And so, very excited about the people we've been able to bring into this program, and I count all the Air Force folks as part of the team as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dan, for that and for sharing your journey with the Air Force and how you've been working with the DoD over the past few years. It's been great to see your growth as well. I remember when I first was introduced to you guys back at the Starburst Selection Committee in DC, I think about 3 years ago, around 2017. So it's amazing all the progress that you've made, but it definitely is a testament to not only being at the right place at the right time with the accelerators, but a testament to the work of you and your team. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, and of course, want to give a shout out to Starburst as well. So we've been working with Starburst from, actually I've met Van in 2015 or 2016 when we were still, Orbital Sidekick was still a barroom idea. So Starburst has been a big help for us along the way as well. So definitely appreciate a lot of the help there.
Great, well, thank you. All right, so with that, after sharing this success story, I know that there are a lot of questions that startups are having as in their mind, whether they're putting it in the Q&A or not. Basically telling myself, I really want to take advantage of these programs, but I am not a US company. I am in Europe, or I'm in Asia, or any other part of the world. How do I go about working in the US? What are those steps that I need to take? Do I set up an entity? Is that the only way that I can start working in the United States or start working with the DoD? So the first person I'd like to bring to kind of touch on those international considerations is Randy Trask. Randy has been a really good member helping with the Air Force with getting that message out as far as how businesses can come to the US and set up shop. He's from the New Mexico Trade Alliance. So with that, I will turn it over to Randy, and the floor is yours, sir.
Awesome, Brandon. Thank you so much. This is really exciting opportunity, seeing how innovative the Air Force is being and this particular international program. For me, is something that was a long time coming. So kudos to everybody for the work that they've done on this. As I said, I think this is going to be a new day for the type of innovation that we can see worldwide with this level of collaboration. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Okay, great. So thanks again so much, Brandon. The New Mexico Trade Alliance is primarily an export assistance program located in New Mexico, although we have a foreign direct investment soft landing program, because we quickly realized that when it comes to foreign companies that are interested in doing business in the United States, it tends to be the big ones that have in-house legal counsel or can hire U.S. site selection consultants and things like that to help them navigate everything that tend to have the most opportunity. There's a lot of companies, like the companies that are participating in this webinar, that don't have access to all of those resources, that once they start realizing what it looks like to try and enter the U.S. market, it can be a little bit more daunting than what they had anticipated. In addition to the export assistance work that we do, we also are a partner of the Air Force Research Lab in New Mexico, focused on economic development and workforce development. Our soft landing program is also being utilized by that office in Albuquerque, as the Air Force continues to want to see you amazing companies working in partnership in close proximity to the laboratories. In New Mexico, we have 2 directorates of the AFRL, space vehicles and directed energy. So entering the US, this particular presentation I'm going to give today, we don't have a whole lot of time. So I just want folks to get the 10,000 foot view of things that you need to take into consideration, but reassure you in that there are resources like ourselves, Starburst, others that are in place to help you answer the questions as you start to navigate through. I chose this picture instead of an American flag and bald eagle because you don't take the time to take these different concepts into consideration. It can be a headache, and you could end up moving in a path that maybe you didn't necessarily intend on doing. So that could cause some time, money, and frustration later on down the road. first thing I'll note is and of course, if you're American on this call, and then it's a good time to go take a coffee break if you'd like, because you'll be familiar with a lot of this. But for those foreign participants, the first thing I'll mention is the size of the United States. And it makes it a different market to enter, because most markets, when you're entering that market, you're locating where your customers are. In the United States, your customers could be spread out everywhere. And there's actually two separate strategies that matter in terms of where your customers are and where you choose to actually set up. To set up, I should note that it is really important to know that when you have transitioned from a sales role in the United States, it's perfectly okay to have customers, but at the point that it appears as though you're operating in the United States and you have not set up an entity, you could be opening yourself up for potential liabilities that you might not have considered. That could be tax related. It could be a customer that wants to sue you at the point that they're looking at what had happened, and they're looking for the entity that is going to be involved in a lawsuit or whatever it might be, and they realize there's not one in the States. They'll assume that your company as a whole, your foreign entity, is the entity that was doing business with them, which many companies want the extra added safety to have an entity set up in the United States, so that should anything happen in the US, it would be that entity that is dealing with whatever issue it might have been within the US jurisdiction. In terms of where you would set up, what you'll find is the states are very interesting in that each state operates almost autonomously from the federal government. I'm sure many of you are seeing this right now with the global pandemic, right? Watching how different states are implementing policy and adapting to the current situation, some very different than others, is a good example of the autonomy that's there. That could be good or bad. Certain states that you could choose might not be the best for you when it comes to the amount of regulation that they have or the amount of taxes that they impose. This goes back to what I'd mentioned about having two different strategies. You could have, using, not to pick on California, but you could have your customer base in California. You could locate in a state that's close to California with less tax and less regulatory burden, and still service your customers in California. So something very important to take into consideration. That level of autonomy in some cases even extends all the way down to the individual communities within those states. A good example that I like to use, we were talking to a startup out of Los Angeles that was working on rocket technologies, and where they were located in the city, there was a city ordinance prohibiting them from using the alcohol that they use to clean the rockets. So they had to add the added expense of opening up a separate facility outside of the jurisdiction of the city, where they would then have to transport those rockets to be cleaned and then brought back in order to comply with local regulations. So you can see in the regulatory side, that can be a challenge. So it's smart to investigate those things up front. Taxes, the taxation systems within each state is also very different. There's the federal tax system, and then each state determines how they want to tax or not tax their industry as well. Some states are high property tax states, typically have little or no income tax. Other states are low property tax states and have high income taxes. Those are also things that need to be taken into consideration. What type of company you're going to open matters, right? There's several different types or structures that you could choose from. A corporation in its pure form is the highest degree of separation from the owners, limiting the liability that's there, both financially as well as any sort of other damages that could be incurred due to an accident or something like that. There are what are easier to set up and easier to manage entities called LLCs. Some companies set up a corporation that then owns multiple LLCs that oversee different market segments. I know that the folks that are on this call are primarily interested in immediate opportunities with the Department of Defense, but I also know, in having talked to several of the companies that have participated in past accelerators like Hyperspace Challenge, that's one opportunity, one market segment that they would love to get into, but they're also looking at a lot of other different opportunities, many of which are in the US. So how that structure is set up in terms of interacting with the government as well as pursuing other opportunities, other markets, is something definitely to be taken into consideration. Next, and like I said, this is a whirlwind tour because these are all important things that you should start thinking about early on. Visas. How would you go about setting up your company in the US? There are many different ways that you can do it. Some visas allow for you to come and set up intending on leaving and don't leave you eligible to apply for permanent residency if that's the direction that you want to take. You eventually want to expand your company in the US and stay in the US for longer periods of time or indefinitely. And other ones are designed for folks that have that strategy in mind. The system in the United States is extremely complicated. But knowing which visa that you want, that makes most sense for what your plans are up front can make a big difference longer term. And then you start thinking about all of the other factors that will play a role in your decision and make it a positive move or could make your move a little bit more challenging. Things like supply chain. If you are a manufacturer, you're making something that has a complicated supply chain, where you set up in the United States could impact your ability to bring things in quickly or cost effectively, as well as your ability to distribute things that are in the country that you're manufacturing in the US that you're then maybe distributing to customers in other places in the world. Import-export capabilities. Are there going to be tariffs associated that maybe you're not paying right now where you're located? Is a foreign trade zone something that you need to take into consideration, which can drastically save or eliminate tariffs on parts, components, and raw materials that you might be bringing in? And then lastly, I'll mention assistance. One of the nice things is when you do set up in the United States, there are lots of entities, and many of them are funded by state and local governments that are designed to support their companies and help them grow. Like I had mentioned, we have an export assistance program that helps our companies identify new customers and partners and opportunities in other markets. And any company that comes into our market is a company that we would extend those services to as well. If you are a superstar company that starts growing and hiring, there are incentives that go beyond federal incentives that state and local governments can give, sometimes even a direct grant financial resources to companies that they want to see and stay in their community. So it's also really important that where you decide to locate, or if you're looking at multiple locations, meet those folks, find out what they offer, find out what 2, 3, 5 years might look like, your growth in 2, 3, 5 years, and what you might be eligible for to help you continue to grow. Lastly, I'll just mention a program. I've kind of dropped a bunch of bombs of major things that should be taken into consideration. But like I said, there are resources that are available to help you in answering these questions. Our particular program is called ABQ Copilot. What we do is we create an a la carte menu of the types of questions that companies might have. Of course, this is a challenge because every company is different, and so their needs or interests might be different. So that's why we focus on kind of this a la carte menu where you express the biggest concerns, questions that you have. And what we do is we prepare a 2 to 3 day agenda. Currently, that's how we operate, is for a company to come and visit us. Obviously, over the next 6 months to a year, this might be a virtual version of that, but you get the idea. So you would create your list of questions, and we have many industry partners that specialize in the different areas where you would have questions. So business formation attorneys, immigration attorneys to help you answer the immigration question, tax experts, right? The taxing is a big deal. Who's going to own your U.S. subsidiary? How is that going to impact your taxes? Is there a risk for double taxation between the countries, depending on where you're coming from? Getting answers to those types of questions. Customs brokers, if we're worried about distribution or supply chain issues. And then we'll even go a little bit farther and do our best to try and identify some potential customers or partners. That way, even if it's not a good fit, it's not the right time, you might walk away with a potential customer or partner. The last thing that I'll mention, and actually before I finish, I should say that obviously many of you are going to be moving on to the next phase of this accelerator, but our particular program is available to any of you. So whether or not you move forward into the next phase, you're more than welcome to reach out, and we're happy to assist you. The last thing I'll mention, and this is something that's being offered here through the Air Force Research Lab Tech Engagement Office in Albuquerque, as well as many other locations that AFWERX is working on. There's even some locations through the Navy and Army, but we have office space that is available for companies that are interested in working with AFRL, and that office space is being provided at heavily discounted or no cost for up to a year for companies that are interested in taking that first step, getting an address, having a place to land, and starting to sort through their first year in the US. So again, anybody who's interested in that, please feel free to reach out to me directly. My contact information is right here. I wish you all a lot of luck, and I hope to maybe work with some of you in the future.
Randy, thank you so much for that overview. Definitely a lot of information, a lot of golden nuggets in that presentation, but all relevant sources of information for people to consider as they're looking to potentially set up shop here in the US and how to go about doing that. Which is perfect because you covered on how, the resources that exist for them to do that. And now I think the next piece of the puzzle is how does that affect international considerations when it comes to foreign investment and who owns the company and where, that money is coming from. I guess most people might or might not be familiar with the term CFIUS, but CFIUS is Committee of Foreign Investments for the United States. And as you know, there have been a lot of recent updates and rule changes to that during this current administration. So with that, I'd like to bring in Jeremy Leader from SNC. And Jeremy is considered one of, I guess you could say, our experts when it comes to dealing with those matters of international investment and having companies have their US subsidiaries here, and with working with the DoD. So with that, Jeremy, I will turn it over to you. So you just unmute yourself and the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Brandon. And again, thanks for having me. I'm currently at the Space and Missile Systems Center, but I guess I represent what Jason referred to as the belly of the beast. Once you you've come to the US, you're doing business with us, and then you want to either get additional foreign investment into your US entity, or we have had CFIUS cases in the past where parent company So one of the big things, again, CFIUS, it's looked as the stick, whereas venture capital investment and the great work that Air Force Ventures and AFWERX is doing is the carrot. You really can't do one without the other, but I would challenge folks to say that CFIUS is a lot more than a stick. It's really about creating good partnerships, and the U.S. is really about, when we work with companies, we want them to be successful, and we also want to protect our national security interests. And those interests can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. Of course, the military, national security is all about our weapon systems, our war fighters, but national security can mean something completely different to a Department of State or a Department of Treasury official. So it's really taking that whole of government approach when we're looking at these problem sets. So most of you have probably seen CFIUS in the news whenever it's a presidential level block, or a lot of, I'd say, negative press in terms of what the U.S. is doing to schwack, companies from coming into the U.S. But the reality is a vast majority of the cases that we review either get cleared or get mitigated. So I want to talk a little bit about that mitigation, right? So let's say you have a U.S. entity for your company doing business with us, and you either want to buy it back or you want to take additional foreign investment. We look at both sides of the equation, right? What does that U.S. entity provide to the Air Force from an Air Force vantage point? And then also, who are these new partners that are coming in? And similar to what Kelly talked to about, evaluating the leadership team of who they invest in. It's the same thing from, who are these foreign investors that are coming in here? Can the U.S. work with them at a diplomatic level? Can we work with those individuals on a company level? So that gets to my first recommendation is know who your investors are, right? And I would say that's very, very important in terms of future business, as well as part of the partnership with the Air Force. I know I saw some questions about OneWeb in the Q&A. I know quite a bit about that, but I'll just say that I think one of their big failures was they put all their eggs into the SoftBank basket. And so when SoftBank had to make some tough choices, OneWeb was kind of hung out to dry. That said, again, know your investors are, and just be open and about that and transparent. The next piece is really, again, what does the U.S. entity provide to the national security apparatus? So let's say you come in and you make a widget, and all of a sudden that widget or thing ends up becoming critical in a bunch of different Air Force weapon systems. So the more critical the service or the product that you provide to us, the more likely we are to want to hold on to that, right? So if you want to leave the U.S. market, sometimes those mitigation agreements look like supply assurance, to where we'll say, you can leave, but we want you to continue making product X, widget X, until we find a transition phase, right? So this kind of gets into one of the things that the U.S. Air Force needs to work on is how we adopt new technology. We have a tendency to, when we get things that we like and that work, we hold on to them and we don't let go, right? We don't want to transition. We're going to buy buggy whips for 200 years. So the speed to adopt new technology is really a key component to break some of that cycle. And another thing that the Air Force and DoD writ large has been working really hard on is how we classify things. And I think a lot of folks in this business space have seen what overregulation has done when space companies are marketing their products as ITAR free. That really only hurts a lot of the U.S. businesses that could have been in that market space, and allied businesses as well. So making sure that we classify things at the right level and not overdo it. It not only hurts U.S. businesses, but it hurts how we share that information with our partners. And so the last recommendation I have is really about knowing your intellectual property rights. Again, the U.S. is know what you're coming into the partnership with, know what's being developed in conjunction with the Air Force. Again, we want a partnership that is much of a win-win situation as possible. But I would say, when we get into consternation or a lot of the legal issues I've seen, it's really about not being clear and upfront at the beginning about those intellectual property issues. And as tough as it may be to work with the U.S. on some of that, when you look at the alternatives, when potential other investors invite you into their country and steal your intellectual property and then create a competitor that then puts you out of business, that's not a good partnership, and that's not where the U.S. wants to be. We definitely want to make sure that we provide those systems for national security, as well as provide those opportunities for commercial expansion and for you to have a successful company. I also saw a question online about the Buy America Act. I figured I'd go ahead and cover that. There's definitely, when people see that, they think, oh, I have no chance. They have to buy American. There's really a two-part test for the Buy America Act, and a lot of it has to do with where a product's manufactured, if it's a COTS product. And then there's also several waivers that get used quite frequently. There's a waiver for public interest. There's a waiver for unreasonable cost if the U.S. company is overcharging ridiculous cost. And there's several other waivers, but the public interest waiver is interesting because that's when you get into treaties, NAFTA, et cetera. And there's actually a DFARS clause. I'm wearing my tie, I have to quote the DFARS. So it's 225.872, and there's a list of countries that are actually on an exempt list for the Buy America Act for the public interest waiver. So hopefully that's helpful to Stu, who asked that question. That's all I had, Brandon.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Definitely more informative and gives a little bit more flavor on the nuances that exist when it comes to the particular details of working with the DoD and how to go about protecting your intellectual property and using that intellectual property to create your subsidiary or to scale your business here. One quick thing that I want everyone to be aware of regarding this Buy America Act is that for this particular initiative, it's not applicable because DASA, which is the UK MOD agency that is contracting this on behalf of the US and the UK for the pitch day, is under an international agreement. So their framework is open for international participation. And then of course the US has reciprocal procedure agreements with 26 different nations that exempts their industry from restrictions to the Buy America statute. So this is all relevant for contracting opportunities under this initiative. And overall, the goal is to be able to directly work with you, the suppliers, and other emerging companies from different parts around the world. So hopefully, Stu, that clarifies your question. And then for anyone else who might also be wondering about that. So thank you, Jeremy, for that insight. And based on all that, now I want to bring back Mike Madsen from DIU because I know that he was, really wanting to touch on the international piece and how they were starting to work with companies around different parts around the world. And I know, Mike, talking offline, you guys have made somewhere around a dozen investments in companies around the world. So handing it back to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brandon. I'm going to share my screen. While I do that, I'm going to circle back to one thing that Jeremy said, and that was he talked about CFIUS and the context of stick and a carrot. And so DIU represents that carrot also in that we offer an option for non-dilutive capital for companies in the TRL 6 to 9 that have that dual use technology that can solve some DoD problems. I think I got the wrong one here. So I think we talked about this, touched on this just briefly. No need to memorize it. I've taken the liberty of writing them down behind me also that you can refer back to as we go through this with the DIU mission set. So I wanted to pull this back up again. I know we talked about it moments ago, but again, just the importance of that global R&D investment that we want to leverage and make DoD a more sophisticated partner and attractive to not only the tech ecosystem in the US, but amongst partner and allies as well. So how do we do that? We offer a couple different things for the DoD as well as the commercial technology. What we offer for DoD is access to leading commercial technology and a vehicle to quickly get that technology into the hands of the men and women in uniform and operationalize that. And we also leverage the commercial R&D dollars that have been spent. So what we can do is that we increase the value of every taxpayer dollar that we spend. Important to the department, especially as we look out to the future of what the budget profile is going to look like going forward. Now for commercial technology, look, let's face it, it takes large muscle movements to do business with DoD, and we try to make that as easy as possible by simplifying the process. We negotiate things like IP, auditability, those kind of things that there's no cookie cutter answer to what is the IP solution. The answer is that it depends from prototype contract to prototype contract, meaning production contract. We recognize that IP is the lifeblood of the technology companies. We also help commercial companies navigate those complex requirements such as registering in SAMs, FedRAMP, IL certification, etc. So we have folks that work with the commercial companies who are the non-traditionals to navigate those very challenging and onerous processes. Here's a breakdown of how we do it. I talked briefly about the problem curation earlier. And what we do there is we make sure when we engage our DoD partner that we understand what their problem is. We get away from a list of requirements and seek a simply stated problem statement, which is something that the tech world understands more than a 700-page requirements document. We also found that by doing that, we get away from preconceived notions of what the solution should be, or trying to solve symptoms of a problem and not the problem itself. While that is going on concurrently, the commercial engagement team is executing what I described earlier, making sure we have a rich, robust ecosystem to get multiple solutions submitted for that. And then what we do, our commercial solutions opening, we talked about this briefly before. This is a competitive process, which is critical to the authority that allows us to use OTs. We can transition directly from a prototype contract to a production contract, provided the prototype was awarded under competitive circumstances, and this is what that satisfies. And we push that out on our website, and it's the problem statement that we've curated, half a page, a couple paragraphs. And what we look for from the commercial company back is a 15-page slide deck or a 5-page white paper. Again, nothing onerous, getting away from the requirements process and simply coming up with a customized way to solve the problem. And then we look to award the prototype contract, like I said, rather quickly, 60 to 90 days. We're running a little bit above that right now, but we brought out some resources to help get that back down. And then we move into the transition phase with a successful prototype into a production contract and into a program of record as applicable, as well as bringing in other DoD entities to solve that. We don't use the SBIR process that you heard about, so we are not in phase 1 through 3, and we typically look for higher TRL levels, technology readiness levels, so 6 to 9, looking for fully baked dual-use commercial solutions. But those other two organizations that are part of DIU, the National Security Innovation Network and National Security Innovation Capital, they cover down on the earlier stage technology to help develop that. We also work with entities in the Secretariat of Research and Engineering in DoD, like DARPA. One of our projects in the cyber portfolio started as an early stage DARPA Cyber Grand Challenge, and we were able to pick it up after some development in DARPA, continue developing it, and eventually we moved it on to a production contract. So it was a big success story for us. We can also award internationally. I think Brandon mentioned that we do have some contracts. We've awarded 10 contracts to companies in 5 different countries. And we also work with VCs, as I mentioned before, to keep our finger on the pulse of emerging technology. And we're also not restricted by we can work with companies that have more than 50% VC investment as well, and then scale across the department. I mentioned our 5 tech focus areas. Probably have another one emerging here in the next couple months as we determine the supply and demand to that. And here's one example I wanted to give of a successful prototype into production and scaling. This started as a project with a maintenance group commander deployed who wanted to increase the maintenance reliability rate of the E-3 aircraft. You can see that up in the upper left. Following a successful prototype on that with a modest amount of money and a modest timeline, we were able to eventually scale this across multiple platforms in the Air Force, wheeled vehicles with the Army and the Marine Corps, as well as working with the Navy now on how we can apply that to ships. So it started with just that one platform, and our defense engagement team was able to take that successful prototype and move it to production, and then move it on to other customers for that commercial vendor to work with. And a couple last things before we move on. Again, our website is where we do put out our solicitations, but we're also working to build out our international strategic engagement plan. As I mentioned, any company can submit proposals to solve DoD problems that are posted on our website. You can sign up for an RSS push, so you don't have to keep hitting the website. You can actually get notification when it's there. But we also offer some other things, such as short-term immersion with DIU to understand our methodology and how we work with our processes to rapidly prototype. With an end state that we're looking at is some sort of joint technology projects as they make sense. We see the current pitch day taking place now, which is fantastic, working with partner and allies around the world to leverage that technology that's taking place globally. So with that, Brandon, happy to answer any questions.
No, great. That was perfect. I think it brought everything together in a nice little package. You know, starting from how do you work with the U.S., in the U.S., with the DoD, and then bringing it all the way to international companies that are abroad that still want to work with the U.S. government through some means or another. And I think, you know, DIU is starting to check that box and not just looking domestically, but internally. So thank you for that, Mike. I mean, throughout the webinar this morning, we've had questions come in and we've done our best to answer them live. And so I believe most of them have been answered already. With that though, I do want to bring back Captain Singleton to see, you know, if he has any last comments to throw in there and kind of like wrap it all up for us before we end this webinar.
Thanks, Brandon. And I'd just like to thank all of the participants on this webinar and workshop today. My hope and what I believe, I guess this webinar would be successful is if we have companies from outside of the US tuning in that are interested in working with us to access the market, raise capital, work with defense as a customer, and hopefully have a better understanding of what that path would look like, and that there is a tremendous source of support to do that. And, you know, most importantly, that we, you know, within the U.S. Air Force, Space Force, the Department of Defense abroad are interested in working with you and adopting solutions from, you know, rising companies around the world. This International Space Pitch Day is an exciting opportunity to open that door and to be more relevant and responsive to, you know, our community of entrepreneurs around the world. And companies that are interested in working with us, that submit proposals and are invited to pitch at Pitch Day, will have the opportunity to walk away from that pitch with a contract on behalf of the UK Ministry of Defense and the US DoD. And that is, you know, recognizing that there are challenges, you know, that have been discussed in part to do that sometimes. So, you know, this is a tremendous opportunity. I want to remind companies that if interested, we have a registration on our website that you need to register to be eligible to submit your proposals by the 2nd of September. That registration is next week on the 19th. So make sure you register, and you know, there's opportunities to reach out for more questions and things like that as we move forward. So thanks, Brandon.
Thank you, Jake. And you know, to answer one other question that came through about the slides that were presented today being shared, Definitely, we will ask for approval from the presenters to share their slides. That being the case, once we do receive approval, we will post these slides up on our website, the landing page for the International Space Pitch Day, within the webinar section where the link was for you registered for this webinar. So you'll be able to see the link for the video to YouTube once we get it uploaded. So you'll be able to come back to this recording and view it again if you want. And then, of course, if you want to see the slides that were presented, we will add those up there as well once we get approval from the organizations. Let's see. Other questions? I think that is all. So with that, I want to thank everyone truly, truly, truly for being with us these past 2 weeks, attending our challenge webinars, attending these webinars this week. I do remind everyone that there is one more webinar next week, which has to do with Ask Me Anything. So this is preparing you, the supplier, for your submission to the DASA competition. Should you have any last minute questions for the stakeholders such as DASA or SMC, DSTL, other people across the UK MOD, they will be online next week, Thursday, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 4 p.m. British Standard Time, to answer those questions for you. So that will be your chance to ask whatever you want to those people as you get ready to submit. I want to thank all the panelist members for presenting today. The information shared was truly exceptional. I think it really helped give the suppliers a little bit more confidence in what they're getting into and what they're, signing up for, if you will, as far as this participation for this initiative goes. So I would like to thank everyone again. Kelly, any last minute questions? I saw your camera pop up and I didn't know if you wanted to say something.
I only popped up to wave.
Oh, okay. Great. I wasn't sure. Just want to make sure I'm not leaving anyone out. But again, thank you everyone for attending. I know it's been a lot of information overload, if you will, but we look forward to receiving all your submissions for this initiative, for this competition. And we wish you all the best of luck. If you have any further questions, you can refer to the website, intlspacepitchday.com. We have an FAQ section up there that we try to keep updated with the most relevant questions. But again, tune in next week for the Ask Me Anything if you guys are interested in participating in that. Oh, some more questions just popped in. Let's see. Oh, okay, just overall comments. Great conversation, very helpful. Great. We truly appreciate the feedback. We are here to make sure that you guys have all your questions answered, are aware of all the necessary resources that take place with this. So with that, we will end today's webinar. We will give you guys 20 minutes back on your morning agenda or your evening agenda if you're somewhere else around the world. Thank you once again, and we will see you guys next week. Have a good one.